So I actually saw a statistic that said that in 40% of households in the United States, the woman is the primary breadwinner. And I found that absolutely fascinating. I don't know if that includes single parent households where I guess her income is more than the child support that she receives. I'm not sure if that's the case, but evidently with women's liberation and them going to like university and in higher paid like careers and stuff, the idea of the man just being like the breadwinner and him making all the money and the woman stays home is getting like less and less common over time. And so men have to adjust to this new reality where sometimes a woman's gonna, have a very high paying office job while you might be like a laborer or something like that. Nothing wrong with that. You've got a great body to show for it, but you're not making as much cash. And I think for a lot of men, that can make them feel insecure. Like that's not what they're meant to be doing. And, maybe they're going to sabotage a relationship and then find a woman who's broker so that they can feel like the man or whatever. So I wanted to have this discussion on how to actually handle it if your woman is making more money than you and to the degree that it is a problem. Matt, do you make more money than your partner?
I did until I started going back to school.
Okay.
So yeah, she not much more though. I think our peak incomes that we've ever had were very close to each other. But at the moment, she's actually working more or less full time, and I'm in school full time, which means I have enough time to work a little bit more. So I am largely living off of grants and loans and things like that.
Okay, no worries. Do you still split like rent, food, groceries, electricity like 50-50?
Yeah, yeah. Even and we've talked about this. Even if I made substantially more, she would feel very uncomfortable with me paying for more of anything. That's basically taken some talking into over years to let that be okay.
Okay. I mean, is that I know we will get back to the original topic at hand, but just to follow that thread
Mm.
quickly, does that worry you? Like if a woman's like, no, like I've got to make like 50% of the money, like what about in the future if you potentially have children or anything like that? Isn't her financial independence streak potentially going to present a problem when the two of you are like, hey, we're one family, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yes, it would, and we've talked about that. In that case, if there's children involved, then the principle falls flat pretty quickly,
Okay.
and we both know that. It's while we're child free, which we currently are.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Thanks for answering
And
that
then
quickly.
and then sorry, but just to really finish that point, does it worry me slightly? But it worries me less than if she were very, very insistent that I should always make more and pay more and just carry the weight of the financial burden like it's an entitlement thing.
Mm.
That I would rather her be reluctant to that and then be talked into it rather than expecting it and then have to be talked out of it.
Yeah, that would be hard, and it does suck for men in marriage, I suppose, because there's such a pressure for men to do 50-50 of, like, groceries, shopping, cleaning, chores, child raising, all of that, but then you do find some women who on top of that are like, "But you're also the man, so you need to take care of me financially," and he's like, "Okay,
Yep.
well, this sucks," like, it's all the part of traditional gender roles that suits you, but none of the parts that suit me, and so that's
It's
interesting.
Schrodinger's feminism, right?
Yeah, exactly. So would it bother you if
Yeah.
your partner did earn like more money than you? Is like part of your masculinity going to be hinged on you being like a really good provider and financially like wealthier than she is?
It's a good question because it depends on a couple of things. One is am I making enough for the two of us, but she just happens to make more, so I'm able to support her, but
Yep,
she
yep.
just outclasses my number. That would be a major variable. Like if I'm clearly failing in being supportive, that would hurt my masculinity, even if she's making less than me, which is actually currently the case. Is that if she were making less than me, I'm still not making enough for the two of us because I'm in school
Mm.
and I'm at the bottom of the totem pole professionally. Um, and so that would depend on that. The other thing would be what am I doing to make money? If
Mm.
I'm making money through some what I consider to be an extremely ethical and helpful means, like for example, becoming a clinical psychologist, which is what I'm aiming for, that caps out median $100,000 a year if you're knowing what you're doing, which is a nice income, but it's not, 500,000 by any means. And hypothetically, she could be making a lot more than that. And so, but I would feel really good about what I'm actually doing. I'm helping people, I'm discovering the intricacies of the human mind, I'm leaving an impact on the well being of my community. I would feel so good about the role that I think that would crowd out most of the more superficial insecurity. And then the last piece is if I'm trying my damnedest, then I would feel almost no shame whatsoever because I see it as an upward trajectory, which is kind of where I'm currently sitting, which is that I'm not judging my self worth based off of where I currently am, but on where I believe I'm headed, at least on a more immediate level. What
And
do you
you
think of all
shared
that?
with me that you're your grade point average was 104%, right? So you're clearly on
In
a
one class.
in one class, but that's clearly an upward trajectory. Like you go in good places, right?
Assuming that I do all the right things, I have very little worry that I will land exactly where I want to land.
I mean, that's awesome. So I think that for a woman who's potentially got this fear, I suppose, that like he doesn't earn enough, it's a big issue for her. Her hypergamy sense is a little bit limited, like what Matt was just talking about in terms of like your ambition, your ability to enjoy your work, your ability to bring like positive change to people's lives and like work that you find fulfilling. I think for a high quality woman, her hypergamy can be expressed in all of those areas. And it's kind of a red flag, I suppose, if the only thing that she can see is a dollar amount, because there's lots of ways to make like unethical amounts of money. You know what I mean? Like ethical money can be a lot harder. And I think that a more quality woman can understand that. And it brings in this discussion of like what you have to offer as a man should be hitting her hypergamy in lots of different areas. Finances is an obvious one and it's easy, and we will talk about the benefits of that. But if you're more social and more confident in social situations, that's a way that you can appeal to her hypergamy. If you're stronger, if you're taller, if you have a couple of age years, if you're smarter, if you have more friends, if you have more hobbies, you're better at things, if you're the guy who drives the car, like when the two of you go out together, like all of these things can place you in that position where she's sort of looking up to you. So if it happens to be like you make 50 grand and she makes 70 grand, but you really love your work and maybe you're like rich in time and enjoying the life and creating an amazing lifestyle, I don't see it as something that you cannot possibly get past in terms of, no, as long as she's making more, then there's no hypergamy. No, like get creative, appeal to her hypergamy in different ways. But there is something unique about money, which I'll talk about in a moment, but I just want to give Matt a chance to give his thoughts on what I just said there.
Yeah, and anyone who fixates on a single variable without the entire context of one's life they're committing the very fallacy that they're usually bemoaning, right? If a woman says, "Well, I made $5,000 more than him this year, so what a chump." That's most men would say that's so cruel. What about all the other amazing aspects of your life? What if you're both making $500,000, but you made $500,000 plus five more? And then the man who says, "Well, you have to make more as a man, or else the relationship's on its way out the door." It's just the same instinct reversed. And so I think smart, healthy, integrated people can afford to, and usually are better off taking a more global view of the situation. And I think the money situation is real, but the money's weird, and our monetary culture is weird. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if that particular fixation, as the standard of living rises in the developed world, will just start to drop like a lead brick, that people will just start to give less and less of a shit about money because it's going to become, it's seeming like it's becoming more arbitrary in terms of what actually amounts to a good life.
I agree. I think it's dropping in terms of importance, at least amongst regular folks.
Beyond a certain threshold.
Yeah, exactly. But then
Yeah.
it seems like you kind of agree with me that any woman who fixates on that dollar amount and her hypergamy tinges on that, that's a red flag, essentially indicating that she's a one-dimensional, low-quality woman, right?
That's the first thing I would think, is if she were really, it's the same thing when I meet a woman who is kind of pathologically afraid of dating a man who is not a certain minimum taller than her, not even shorter than her, but just minimum, 5-foot women who feel uncomfortable with a guy who's like my height, for example. When I meet those women and I've had this weirdly expressed to me without the irony of them not realizing that I am the very height that they're afraid of in their boyfriends. It's like, this is clearly, you should care about more than this, and they just sometimes can't get past it. And then I think men are like that to the same degree, with a certain level of attractiveness in the women they're at. As if she's just not quite hot enough, then all of her good qualities just don't really matter.
That's true. People can fixate on particular things, and it's and money is an interesting one. It's for a long time I didn't have like any money at all, and the relationship was absolutely fine. I was appealing to my partner's hypergamy in a whole bunch of other ways. And it has been weird now that like I'm into my 30s and I'm more established in what it is that I do for a living, that I'm like, okay, I've got some money. My partner's been studying for 7 years. Now she's in her master's years and about to finally, get out into the workforce or whatever and make her own money. But it's what's been interesting to me, having not had this be a part of our regular relationship at all for so many years, to suddenly have like the money to be able to pay for everything and to support her. I kind of like it. It's weird how much it has appealed to me. I never thought I'd be one of those kinds of guys, but it does feel something really nice and like masculine and like God, I'm doing this and it's like, hey, it's okay, I got this. Like I'm supporting you and the gratitude that comes back to me. My partner's not at all shy about being really really thankful and grateful that I've been able to give her this opportunity. I like it. I really, really like it. And I'm a little bit confronted by how much I like it because I probably would have come much more
Mm,
strongly down the line of it doesn't really matter. You know, there's so much more to life than money and supporting things like that. And I still agree with all of that. But full disclosure, I'm a little bit humbled by how much I do enjoy appealing to her hypergamy with money. It's something I never would have
yeah.
predicted. So yeah, what do you make of that?
I appreciate your honesty, and I'm thinking of a couple corollaries that I'm going to go even more superficial if I can. Just if you've ever been in the position of being in really good shape to the point where people are strangers are commenting on it, and you look in the mirror one day and you're like, "Damn, I look good." Like that you know it's not that big of a deal. You know that there's so much more to your character and to the world than having the right V taper proportion. But it's a nice feeling. Same thing with having a partner who's got that hourglass shape that you know that pretty much everyone who passes her by is thinking consciously or unconsciously about their desire for her, at least all the men, probably some of the women. That's a nice feeling too, right? And so I think we can acknowledge and enjoy these more superficial joys in in some of these things whilst keeping them in mind in the broader context of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I'll
healthy.
agree with all of that. So then like, if we do you kind of agree then that if for a woman, if you're making less than her and that's a problem for her, then there's not really anything you
Mm.
can do about it, right? Like, you can't sort of shame her out of that or encourage her to grow. Like, okay, like if this is what's important to you, this is not going to work. Are you on the same page about that?
No, because I would have questions if my partner, for example, were to tell me you're not making enough money. Um, I would want to know why she thinks that, and if she said because it's less than mine, and that's just the end of the conversation, that's a different answer than because both of our bank accounts are slowly draining, or because I see you wasting 5 hours a day doing whatever. And so it's very often the complaint is not the actual complaint. There's deeper levels to it, and so even you hang out with your friends too much, if that's ever a complaint you get, it's usually not about the amount of minutes you're with your friends. It's about the amount of minutes you're in your home not paying attention to her, like wasted time. Right. And so it takes some digging and some massaging and some, I don't want to say interrogating, that's a little harsh, conversation, the nicer version, to figure out what the true problem is. And I think most women who would come to their man saying, make enough money, more often than not, it's probably something deeper and more justified than that.
Okay. Yeah. So, but in the instance that it is about the money, that's what can you do, right? Like,
Yeah, if it's solely about that and it's just a weird thing for her where your number is smaller than hers and therefore you're ugly, I mean, there's not a lot you can do with that. You might just have to hope it changes, and if it doesn't, see your way out the door
yeah, okay. And then, but if on the flip, you make
or make
less
more
money
money.
than her, but she doesn't have a problem with it, you have a problem with it, then there's a lot
Mm,
of work that you can actually do on it, I think, because
yes,
you're just
massively.
experiencing a personal insecurity of your own. And if it's not coming from her, then the obligation is actually to do the work inside yourself rather than projecting, which is what some men might do in that situation. You know, every time
Mhm.
there's a kind of argument, it's like, well, you don't respect me because I don't make enough money. And she's like, I don't care about that. Like, you seem to care about that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what advice would you give to a man who's experiencing like a personal sense of failure just because he's not making more than his partner and she doesn't seem to have an issue? Like, how can he work to save that relationship?
Yeah, that would take couples therapy and individual therapy. It would be worth exposing yourself to other healthy relationships that violate that standard, because a lot of these guys are probably getting this from very likely just a few examples in their early life of what are probably not very functional relationships, but they ended up falling apart allegedly on this basis. And
Mm,
so it just stuck into their mind as a 6 year old or whatever it was that this is a really big fucking deal. And so I would say you got to do a bit of a deep dive on where this all comes from and about who you're borrowing it from. And then I advocate this for most situations of emotional substance is you got to just take it upon yourself to reinvent your instincts on as many things as you can. And this is one of those things where it's actually quite easy to reinvent the instincts because money is very much a modern abstraction that we don't have very deep roots about. What we really care about is usefulness, attentiveness, strength, raw sex appeal, charisma, these things that are a lot more fluid and a lot more intangible. Those things we have cared about for hundreds of thousands of years. Money is brand spanking new. And so it's pretty easy to undo your wiring about money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. There's mostly like the messaging you have inside yourself is going to be culturally put there. It's not necessarily going to have such a strong biological basis. So there's a couple of different strategies I would advise a man in this situation. Is the first thing is that if your income is less because you're working less, then make sure you're using your rich in time to the best possible use of it, right? Like if you're working only 3 days a week and she's working 5 days and you spend those other 2 days playing video games, everyone has the right to unwind. I'm not shaming you for playing video games, but like essentially if you're wasting your time, you're not bettering yourself, you're not doing any self-improvement, you're not developing new hobbies, then that's probably where the issue is really going to lie in the future. It's that if she can see that you are tangibly benefiting your life and her life by those 2 days extra off and making things awesome, then you're going to feel a lot less insecure and less likely to sabotage the relationship. That's one thing. Second thing I'd say is that when you're splitting up the income, like in terms of the distribution, if she's genuinely okay with the fact that she makes more, like she just happened to work for her dad's company and then got put into a senior management position. She makes like 300K and you're like, okay, well, I have to work my way up from the bottom. It's like, all right, so we recognize there's been like a little bit of privilege here. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that, all right, well, we're a family, we're going to have children. We can't just be putting 50-50 because now your money is my money. So a fun way to kind of distribute the cash might be to have her pay for some of the more boring stuff like the mortgage payments and the electricity. But when it comes to like going out for dinner or going to the movies or going on a holiday, you fit the bill, you just take out your card and you start to pay for everything. It's a little bit of a symbolic gesture, but I think that it could make a man feel a little bit better. And the other way, of course, to do is to flip it, is that if you find that your girlfriend is in a high paying career and she makes a lot of money, whereas yours is less lucrative, maybe she should work less days a week in order to bring your incomes more on par, right? The fact that she's able to command like a lot of money per hour for her work means that she could probably get away with just working 3 days per week and you work 5 days per week. Now, from a purely economic point of view, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, no, the person with the higher income potential should be making more. But money isn't absolutely everything in life. If you do have enough to meet your basic needs, if she's able to leverage her higher paying job into giving her more work-life balance and more free time and allow you to still be like that main kind of guy who's like, yeah, I'm putting in the long yards, that's going to work out really well when it comes time to starting a family because she's going to need to drop off her work hours anyway. And I've seen this work successfully in couples where like a man is like a laborer and a woman works like a desk job or whatever, and she's very highly paid. And she just dropped down to 1.5 and then 2 days a week as a mother. And she was able to, that was still really helpful, all of that cash, but he just kept out grinding it out at his job. And he's making more and more each year, but it wasn't the same as what she was. I saw that work. So those are some suggestions that I have to help men hopefully overcome like their little insecurities that they might have about this dynamic.
I like those. Those are fun workarounds that, at least the first one was a bit of a workaround. The second one is just a kind of a long-term strategy. And this is what communicating with your partner would be, or working with a relationship therapist, or Alexander, for God's sakes. I mean, clearly, you've got some good ideas. But I do often bias towards what can someone do internally first. That's usually the first place my mind goes before you even try to approach your partner with solutions. And something that came up in my mind is kind of a micro point, and tell me what you think of this, is she will be less concerned with your time wasted. Actually, let me flip that. She'll be much more concerned with your time wasted if you agree that it's wasted time. If you spend 3 hours a week playing video games but you say, look, this is just 3 hours of how I unwind. It's 3 hours. It's not that long. People spend more time than that watching a movie or, talking to their friend on the phone. It's pretty defensible. But if you say, oh, I did it again, I spent 3 hours this week, I said I wouldn't do that again, and she's seeing you, reflect on your own bad behavior and yet fail to change your behavior, that's the red flag. It's not actually about the time and the task. It's about you failing to meet your own standards for yourself, which is just scary for women and for anybody, but especially for women, because you not meeting your own standards as a man could have very certain cataclysmic problems for her in her deep evolutionary brain. And so that's something to worth consider as well.
Yeah, it's huge. Like how you frame it's massive is that she might not mind that
Mhm.
you make less money, but if she senses that you really, really care about it and are really insecure, then she's going to be like, okay, like this is a thing. But if you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like I love my life. I'm so happy with my career and where I'm at and how much I make. It meets all my needs and she's chilled. Then if she's got a problem with that, then she almost looks like the foolish one. And so the advice that Matt gave is very, very good. Sense like where that insecurity is coming from inside yourself and then
Mhm.
do the work. Like what, like, okay, like answer me this question. You make less money than her. So what? And I don't mean that in a flippant way. I mean in terms of like actually track that. So then what do you
Yeah.
imagine is going to happen? What do you imagine is going to be the consequences? Like, okay, well, if I make less money, then she's not going to respect me. Okay, well, that's something you can talk to her about. Actually find out if that's true. And if you find that no,
Mhm.
she still completely respects you, if you hang on to that, then you're kind of at war with reality and you're probably dealing with something that doesn't have anything to do with her, something that's been put in you about an insecurity from way, way back. And you need to actually work on that one,
Mhm.
which I would thoroughly recommend doing so you don't play that out in a psychodrama with your girlfriend and potentially sabotage things. But I think that's the end of my thoughts on it. Do you have any final words on the topic, Matt?
Nope, you perfectly gave an example of what's called Socratic questioning,
Hmm.
where you just ask questions to get deeper underneath these beliefs. This is standard CBT. Go to therapy, you will get good at this, and
Awesome.
it solves 99% of problems.
Very good. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one.